Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We'll just be getting started in a couple more minutes. I think we still have a few people who are joining us. While you're waiting, if you'd like to participate in our iClicker questions, we have put the course information up on the screen for you, and we also put the direct course link in your chat or questions panel. That link will take you directly to our iClicker course, so you can respond to our polling questions today as a student. Welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for our webinar, iClicker and Achieve Active Learning in the English Classroom. We just have a few announcements before we start the presentation. Once again, if you're just joining us now, we have put our iClicker course information up on the screen and also in the chat panel. It is completely optional to participate, but it is a lot of fun, so we really do encourage you to join us. And even if you've never used iClicker before, it should only take about 30 seconds or so to create a new iClicker account. You can follow along with the instructions on the screen or click on the link in the chat panel to get started as I go through the rest of our housekeeping announcements. If you already have an instructor account with iClicker, you can use your instructor email and password to log in with the link in the chat panel. You can also participate with your mobile device using the iClicker student app. Just look for Macmillan Learning as the institution and iClicker and Achieve English as the course. We have also muted everyone to keep out background noise, but we do want to hear from you. If you'd like to ask a question or give us any feedback, feel free to type it into the questions panel on your screen at any time. We'll be monitoring the questions as they come in, but we'll also be saving some for the Q&A session at the end of the webinar. And then if we don't get to your question in the webinar, we'll be sure to follow up with you by email. And finally, we are recording this webinar. We'll be emailing you a link to the recording and the slide deck and some extra resources within the next few days. That's it for housekeeping. So with that, my name is Lindsay Thomas, and I am the Training and Documentation Manager at iClicker. I am very excited to introduce today's presenters. We have Natalie Dougal, who is our iClicker Training Specialist and Faculty Advocate, and we have Lindsay Green, who is the Learning Solutions Specialist for English at Macmillan Learning. Both Natalie and Lindsay also happen to be former English instructors themselves, so we're in for a treat. Natalie is going to kick things off for us, so over to you, Natalie.
All right, thank you so much, Lindsay. This is a topic that is near and dear to my heart because I love iClicker, but even more than that, I love our English folks because these are my people. I got to teach composition and literature in a community college for 13 lucky years before I came to Macmillan. So I have a lot of unique ideas about ways that you can use iClicker in your class that are specific for English instructors. So first, we're just going to talk about iClicker and Achieve and give you a quick introduction to both of them. So if you came in with a lot of knowledge of Achieve, but not so much iClicker, or you have a lot of knowledge of iClicker, but not so much Achieve, you're going to have a good understanding of how these tools can really work together for you and your students. Then I'm going to go a little bit more into iClicker, and I'm going to give you a demonstration of how it works. And this is when you'll have that chance to participate as a student. And I really hope that you do. It's really fast and easy. If you When I turn on that first question, some of you might even still be setting up your iClicker account and you'll still be able to answer that first question. It's really, really fast. Don't feel like you can't take that moment to go and sign up for iClicker right now, just so you can feel what it's like to be a student in an iClicker class. Then Lindsay is going to come and show us Achieve, and she's going to show us a lot of those really cool tools that are specific for English instructors, that make a lot of the tasks of teaching composition and literature, and those complex ideas easier. And then lastly, we're going to end with our favorite part of these webinars, which is question and answer. We love it because we love hearing from our instructors. iClicker and Achieve are instructor developed tools, meaning that we look to you, our instructors, for how we develop our tools and what sort of resources we put where. So getting questions from you is super helpful for us. So feel free to throw any questions you have into the chat. It's being monitored by a team, and we'll be sure to get to whatever answers you need by the end of our time together. So quickly, Achieve is an easy and simple way to design and deliver course content to your students. So with Achieve, you're able to customize a course that really corresponds to how you teach in a unique way, but without a huge amount of effort from you at the beginning to customize it. It's like going to a wonderful buffet where you're able to really pluck from a huge amount of resources, and then send them to your students, bring them to your students, and your students are able to interact with them in a way that's really, really comfortable. 10 years ago, having an all digital English class sounded kind of torturous, the idea that you would interact with the screen that way. But now tools have developed in such a way that it's really kind of a delight to interact with materials this way. Achieve's English courses include diagnostics and writing tools that make it easier than ever for you to give actionable feedback to your students. Back when you're doing everything by hand, you'd get a hand cramp putting in how many times somebody has a comma splice. With Achieve, you're able to take a student's issue with comma splices and make it something teachable, not just a little bit of a CS on the corner of a paper. Achieve also includes a dynamic ebook that's available within the Achieve system. And this is really great because our students want ebooks. This is how they're interacting with materials now. But also, it makes it so that you can take whatever it is you're reading as a class, you can easily display it as a class during class time on your projector and interact with the writing materials and reading materials that way. Achieve also really easily integrates with your learning management system. So you're able to use Achieve as this really powerful tool that contains all of your data, and then you're just able to integrate it with your learning management system that you use on your campus without any fuss. And then lastly, Achieve includes the iClicker student app as part of your tool set for reaching your students. So if you're already using Achieve, iClicker is included. Maybe, I don't know about you, but when in-class polling first started to come out and it was only limited to multiple choice questions, I didn't see a big application for it in the English classroom. Now that iClicker can use a much broader scope of questions, For you as the English instructor, it might be time to start considering it as part of your tools. And since it's included with Achieve, it's something that you can bring in and try without any cost to you or your students. So iClicker is this really easy and simple way to make classes responsive and interactive. Instructors ask students questions and students respond in real time. And you might say, yeah, I'm doing that all the time anyway. My students and I have a lot of discussion going on in our class. What's great with iClicker is it's not just going to be your very confident or very extroverted students who participate. You're going to be able to give a voice to every single one of your students in your classroom. You're able to use iClicker with whatever tools you're already using as well. So if you're just using PowerPoint slides, that's fine. I'm just using Google Slides here, and I just put in questions to my deck when I want to ask them, and iClicker floats on top of whatever you're using and works along with you. So you don't need to add anything onto a program. You don't need to feed anything into a separate system. iClicker goes along with whatever it is you're already using. iClicker activities and question decks are also included with Achieve. We have these instructor activity guides, and there are all kinds of iClicker activities in there that you can use with your students. I have a few examples in my deck today, and they're things like having a discussion with your students about things like tone, for example. That's something that you can run a quick 15-minute activity and you can see, what do my students get out of this? And it's a nice way to experiment with it. So I want to take the pulse of this group and I want to see how familiar you all are with iClicker and Achieve. So to ask a question, all I had to do is I created this slide in my deck. It looks very, very fancy, but it's just a slide. There's nothing programmed or anything. And then I have my iClicker Cloud desktop software running. I'm going to click on this poll button and I'm going to make sure that I've pulled up multiple choice as my question type. And then when I click the play button, what happens is my desktop is captured and it is sent to student devices. So if you're logged in right now, when you look at your iClicker account, you're going to see these questions and your options for response. And don't worry if you haven't joined our session yet, you can do that right now. I'm going to ask several questions during our time together. So feel free to add the course now. And usually multiple choice questions take between 30 seconds to a minute. Since this is our first question, sometimes you let it go a little bit longer. I'm going to let this one go for a full minute because I know people are kind of rushing to get in. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop it. All right, and then I click on my results and I can display my results to the entire class. So it looks like we have a variety of experience levels. Some people who've used Achieve, some people who've used iClicker, some who've done both, and some who've done neither. Everybody's going to get something out of our time together today. And you'll see to mark a question as correct, I simply had to touch on it to turn it green, and I can turn more than one answer correct if I want to. But of course, when you're teaching in the English classroom, it can feel like, hey, I don't want to teach multiple choice questions. I really want to get my students away from that idea of multiple choice questions. That's great. iClicker has it for you. iClicker also does a lot more than just ask multiple choice questions. The first thing that we can do with iClicker is we can get students to class with iClicker attendance. So every time that you run an iClicker poll, and every time, and you can also set attendance to auto run so that you don't even have to ask polling questions every day. What happens is your students come to class, they log into iClicker and they click join class. And what this does is it creates an attendance record for you and for the students. And even if you're somebody who doesn't generally take attendance, maybe that's not something that's important for you, and your institution doesn't make you do it. It's something that's really helpful for students as a self-monitoring tool, and they get this really great little calendar that tells them when they've attended class and when they've missed class. Um, and so students really like it, and that's one of the things that we've done with iClickers. We've tried to make it into something that students really enjoy interacting with. Next, you're able to make your passive classes active with iClicker polling. So sometimes people refer to polling questions as asking a quiz question during class. We call them polling questions because they go one at a time and they're really, done to bring the group together. So some of the reasons that we use polling questions are to reset student attention. I know that if I'm standing at the front of a group of students and I'm explaining a concept to them, try as they might to pay attention, some of them, their minds are going to wander off. By asking a polling question, I'm able to reset their attention on the subject at hand. We're also able to give every student a voice with iClicker polling, and this is something that I think of as especially valuable in the English classroom. So much of our work in the classroom involves really getting students to articulate why they think what they think and how they support what they believe. And we do that a lot of times through discussion and through asking our students questions that challenge them. And something that can happen in our classroom is we can have a dominating voices that sort of rise to the top, and that's not always a bad thing. But it does make it so that those quieter students, those students who are used to being more passive, can kind of drop out of the learning experience. With iClicker, we make sure that every single student has a voice and every single student is participating, even if every single student isn't going to want to raise their hand or necessarily debate something in front of the class. You're also able to create really tight feedback loops with iClicker. If I give my students a quiz on Friday and I work like the Dickens all through the weekend, and then on Monday I can give them that quiz back, that's a pretty fast turnaround time for grading. But what happens is I ask my students questions on Friday. When I give them back their quizzes on Monday, all they're going to look at is the grade on the top of the quiz. They're not going to look at the questions and why they got them wrong. So one of the things that iClicker does is you are able to ask your students questions. You can say to them, hey, which of these statements is the strongest thesis statement? And then you can get them to invest a little bit and invest a right answer, and then you can have a discussion about which answer is the best thesis statement. And doing this keeps the focus on the material, and it makes it so that students are creating these feedback loops where they try and make a challenge and they try and get an answer correct, and then they immediately know whether they got it right or not. And that is really important to the learning process. Lastly, students are able to create flashcard packs and practice tests with iClicker study tools. So every iClicker question that you ask students are able to bookmark those questions, and then they're able to use them with the study tools feature to test themselves later. So not only are they re-emphasizing course concepts, but they're actually remembering real class activities and experiences that they had as they study, which does really dynamic things to their memory and their ability to learn. So getting your iClicker course going and Achieve is really simple and fast. Everything with iClicker that we've done with an eye towards simplicity for you and your students. So the first thing that you have to do is have some questions that you want to ask your students, or you can download them from Achieve. Next, you create your iClicker course in Achieve. So all you do is you click on your gradebook. In the upper right corner, there is a little button that says iClicker. You click that button, it walks you through the process. It takes about 3 minutes. Lastly, you just want to get comfortable with using iClicker Cloud. Another reason why a lot of instructors maybe haven't brought iClicker into their classroom is it's a live event. It's a live tool that you really want to use well in front of your students. You don't want to bring some technology into your classroom and then try and use it and have hiccups. I think a lot of us, when you were teaching maybe remotely, you're using Zoom or you're using Microsoft Teams or something along those lines. And, you experienced what it was like to have to use technology live with your students. Um, and I think a lot of us became more comfortable with those sorts of things. We want to help you become as comfortable using iClicker Cloud as you did using Zoom, or way more comfortable. We have a ton of self-support items like videos and articles, but we also have people like myself, Lindsay, our colleague Elena, who will meet with you for a demo or a training where we can show you how to use iClicker and we can help you get set up to use it in your class. And we could even play student with you so that you feel really confident turning your polls on and off. So I want to ask everyone a question as I get a little bit more into ways that you can use iClicker in your English classroom. I want to know how this group defines active learning. So this is an example of a short answer question. And again, I just put in a blank slide. I wrote this question in the middle of it. And when I clicked that play button, iClicker took a desktop shot of it and sent it to my student devices. And now they're able to respond. They're able to respond with up to 140 characters, which is like a tweet. Um, and this can be a really great challenge. I love page limits and I love word limits. When I taught English 101, I would always teach the 5 paragraph essay. And inevitably, I would have these students who are like, I did 6 paragraphs. Do I get extra credit? And I say, no, actually, you've lost points now. And they would be so perturbed. And I would say, the limit is there for a reason. It's not always good to go over. So 140 characters is really great because it's going to challenge some of your more verbose students. So I've got about 4 responses. I'm going to let this go for 90 seconds. And it's always nice to ask your audience what they know about a topic before you launch into it. All right, I'm going to give you 5 more seconds to respond. There we go. We're getting a few more. All right, let me go ahead and hit stop. And here I can look at my results. I don't have to reveal my results, or I can preview them privately on the instructor app, but let's see. Okay, so how do you define active learning? Having students participate in their own learning. I love this definition. Students paying attention in class. It's a little bit more complicated than that, and I'm going to get to that in our next slide. In-class peer review of essays. Yes, this is an example of a type of active learning. Student participation. That's a little bit vaguer than I want to go. When students engage with material, that could be reading though. Active learning is when students are engaged with the material on multiple levels and carry the material in and beyond the classroom. All right, I'm going to give that one to that. Learners participate in a way that drives the depth of the teaching. All right, I like this one a lot. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a blue star. And what this does is it marks it as the best response. So I can mark multiple answers as correct, and then I can mark one as the best response, and that will be the response that gets studied in those student tools that I talked about. I also have the option to enter another response down here. I can also display my answers as a word cloud if I want to, which can be really, really nice. And what we can see here is that students are at the center of everything that we're doing. No matter what we responded to, we were thinking about our students in the middle of it. So how is active learning defined from like a pedagogical standpoint? So it's helpful to think about passive learning versus active learning. Passive learning is that really old-timey, when we think of a stereotypical classroom, we see an instructor at the front of the classroom presenting information to an audience. And it's very instructor-driven with students listening and taking notes. So a lot of times when I ask instructors, what is active learning? They'll say, oh, the students pay attention, or the students listen, or the students take notes. And those are all things that, if you go to the movies, you're going to listen and pay attention. Would we say that you're having an active experience, or would we say you're having a passive experience, though? This passive experience is about consuming and taking in without a lot going back. So, students listening and taking notes, it's good activity. We want students to obviously do that, but it is not active learning as a learning strategy. With passive learning, class is a one-way conversation that goes from instructor to student. And this can be really nice because we can control that conversation and we can have a lesson plan that's very, very tight. One of the things with active learning that can be a challenge for instructors is there's more flexibility required. Instructors involve students in the lesson. Without the students, no lesson can take place if you're doing active learning. They are essential to it. With active learning, students learn by doing. So when we were talking about peer reviews and that response, we're saying students do these peer reviews. That's one of the hallmarks of active learning. Active learning makes class a two-way conversation between instructor and student. And so this is where that flexibility piece can come in that can be a little bit challenging. But that's one place where English instructors really thrive and shine. They are well known for being flexible. And in that way, iClicker is really perfect for the English classroom because English instructors are already doing a lot of these active learning techniques. They just haven't had iClicker as a tool necessarily. So here's an example of a way that you can use multiple choice questions to have an interesting discussion with your students in class. So here is an example of a set of thesis statements that you could use with your students. And here I'm asking my students to identify which opening line makes them want to read more about healthy food options on campus. Um, and one of the things that I did when I wrote this question is I loaded it with the types of thesis statements that my students are drawn to, but I want them to avoid. For example, the classic, in this essay, I will discuss. Or I have here, the dictionary defines, okay? Or we have an example here of a student using first person. And I can talk about, hey, here's why we don't necessarily want to use first person in an academic essay. And then I have two examples where we can go back and forth and say, okay, which one is the better statement? So I want to know what this group chose as the better statement. I've had 7 people consistently participating, so that's how many responses I'm watching for, but people do take breaks. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop this one. Let's see which thesis statement we liked the most. Okay, look at this. I love this. We are evenly split between B and E. All right, a sophomore has $1. Do they buy crunchy chips or a green banana? And then we have E, college students today want healthy options, but colleges aren't meeting those desires. So if I had you all in a real brick and mortar classroom, what I would do is I would not decide which one was better. Instead, I would say, okay, everybody who answered B, I want you to find somebody who answered E. And then I want you two to have a discussion where you try and come to a consensus on which statement is better. And then what I would do is I would ask this statement again using the exact same iClicker slide. I wouldn't create anything different. Um, and I would see how opinions shifted. And in this way, we can take a multiple choice iClicker question and we can turn it into a really great discussion question for students. When students look back at their iClicker activity, they're going to remember this activity that you had in class and the discussion that you have. So it becomes a much bigger activity than just trying to get students to answer a correct multiple choice question. Here's an example of a short answer activity, and this is one that I took from Achieve. So there are all kinds of Achieve activities. I just took this one and copied and pasted it. So imagine that you are mentoring a small group of high school students. The students do not have a lot of experience with academic writing. Reflect on your own experience and what you've learned about plagiarism. Write one tip that will help them become responsible writers who avoid plagiarism. So I could just quickly ask this as a short answer question. And in doing this, I can crowdsource with my students and get to know what this class knows about plagiarism. Okay, I'm not going to stay on this one because we have a lot to cover. And I hope if you've been participating with iClicker and you feel that little disappointment you didn't get to answer, that's how iClicker works. It gets you more invested in what's going on in class. I wanted to show you an example of target questions. This again is another tool that the English instructor might use differently than another instructor. So with target questions, you're actually able to send students an image and they respond by touching where on the image they feel the correct answer is. So one of those applications for this is to help students evaluate what they're finding online as far as online resources go. So for a lot of your students, even if you tell them do not research this online, the first thing they're going to do is look online because they don't feel confident about what they're doing online. So I find it much better to talk about it at the beginning and to embrace it as part of what my students are doing. It's that living in reality thing I like to do. Um, So what you do is you just conduct a simple Google search and then use target questions to ask students to click before they think. For example, I have them look for college student nutrition. And here you can just see I'm all pulled up over here. And I'm just going to go down here and I'm going to say to my students, all right, my students, I'm going to ask you a target question. And what I want them to do and what I want you to do is based on what we see here, I want you to touch on which resource you think would be best for a college essay. So here we've got bestcolleges.com, and all you have to do is touch the image and then click send. And then this is going to create a heat map for our class where we'll be able to see how students are interacting with these sources. I've got 5 responses. I've got 6 now. Let's see if that 7th one comes through. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop it. And then when I'm ready, I can go ahead and pull up my results panel. I'm going to click on it because I can grade it this way. Okay, and I can see my students are kind of all over the map. I have students who are picking the one from the .gov source. I have students who are picking the ones that are from the EDU sources. And this is a really great time to have a conversation with my students about different sources. When I want to grade my answer, I simply draw a box around where I feel the correct answer is. I'm going to put it up here just for funsies right here, and then I click save. And now all of the ones that are in the box are correct and the ones that are outside will be incorrect. This can go on as a activity. Whoops. By doing it again in Google Scholar. And then I like to end it by going to your college's library resources and showing them what they can find in things like EBSCOhost. And so they're interacting with it through iClicker. And then, when they go and they study these things later, they're actually seeing screenshots from these tools that you want them to use. So it's a really nice way to send students screenshots as well. Here's another example of a way you can use iClicker. I find that my students love to play teacher, and they are brutal when they're allowed to grade one another's work. And so, a really fast exercise that you can do is you can pull up an essay. You can even do it in Achieve, and you can turn on a multiple choice and say, okay, I want to know what grade would everyone give this title of this essay? Junky foods equal junky minds. And they can just go through really quickly. And I can see how engaged my audience is right now. Look how quickly I'm getting these responses. I'm able to, and my number 7 came back. I'm so happy. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stop this one. And we can just quickly see, all right, no one gave it a failing grade. I like that. Some people gave it a C, gave it a B. I like it. I'm going to give it an A. Um, um, and again, you can just see iClicker brings a sense of purposeful fun into your class. Another kind of question that you can use with your classes is anonymous questions. Something that's super important to all of our students is discussion of the writing process and honesty about the writing process. So something that you can do with iClicker is after students have turned in an essay, you can go and do a series of anonymous questions with them where you ask them to rate how well they did with, say, the writing of an essay. So here you're asking them to agree or disagree. I devoted the time and energy necessary to do my best work. Other questions, and I have this as a collection of questions that you can use if you want to. I have questions like, what could my instructor have done to have helped me write this essay? Things like that. And this is something that you could do really quickly in a class after every time you write an essay. And if students know they're going to be asked to reflect on their writing process, they actually invest more in the writing process. Isn't that interesting? So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stop this. When students answer anonymous polls, their answers cannot be graded. Okay, because then I could backward engineer my grade book to see how students responded. The answers also disappear from student devices after they've responded, so no one looking over their shoulder could see how they responded. And then we also turn this black so that you don't forget to turn it off before you ask a question that needs a grade. Okay, here are some more ideas for iClicker in the English classroom. And I'll just tell you, I have a million of these ideas. So if you want to get together and talk, let me know. So dressing it up, dressing it down. This is a way that you can help students practice modifying messages for audience and tone. So I'd like to take maybe a statement put out on Twitter that's interesting, but the tone is all wrong for an academic audience, and I have my students rewrite it so that it could show up in an academic essay. Or I'll take an idea that's very highfalutin and I'll say, how can we bring this down for maybe a Facebook audience? And we do that using iClicker short answer. We also use iClicker to generate and rank supporting details. So you can have students generate potential supporting details using short answer. I know it's really difficult to get students to come up with more ideas than they need. So this is a way to get them to try and do that. And then you have them number them and rank the ideas focusing on the most and least powerful. That can be a really fun group activity. You can also do a reflection assignment. So I've talked a lot about iClicker polling, but we also have iClicker assignments. So after students write an essay, you can have them reflect on their writing process with an iClicker assignment. And I've actually loaded one into our iClicker class, so you can see an example of it. And what it is it's basically polling questions that students can answer in their own time. So it feels like an iClicker question, but it's something where you could say, okay, turn in essay number 1, and then when you're done with that, go and do this iClicker assignment where I just can get some feedback on how the writing process went for you. So be sure to check out that assignment in our iClicker class. You can do those anonymous progress checks like the one that I just showed you for after writing an essay, but you can also do it while they're working on it. And then lastly, you can use exit polls to help students and yourselves. So one of the things I'm going to do when I end our iClicker session is I'm going to end it with an exit poll. And that's going to ask you to rate the clarity of today's presentation. And also you'll have a little spot to ask me any questions that you might have. I have used a lot of time and I'm ready to hand it over to Lindsay, who's going to tell you all about Achieve. Lindsay, are you ready to take it away from me?
Yes, yes. I'm just waiting for the share option to pop up
Yep,
on
I
my.
have to give you presenter. I have to stop showing my, and then I have to change the presenter to you.
Perfect.
There you go.
Awesome. Thank you so
All
much. So
right.
I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen here now. So thank you all so much for joining today. I'm Lindsay Green, the Learning Solutions Specialist for English. And today I'm going to walk you through some of the resources available in Achieve. We're going to be focusing on diagnostic study plans as well as writing tools in particular. And it's important to know that these tools have been pedagogically developed for English instructors specifically. And they're really going to provide you with some tools that you need to improve learning outcomes for your students, as well as really just making that process of managing your course more efficient overall. So we're just going to go ahead and dive right into it. I'm actually in one of my demo courses for Achieve right here, and we'll take a look at diagnostics first. So we do have diagnostics as well as individualized study plans for sentence grammar, punctuation style and mechanics, reading skills, and reading strategies. And what I mean by diagnostics is the fact that we've got a practice test which students would take. And from that, it would produce an individualized study plan that you could utilize with your students. And then you can do a final test once you're done covering these things so that you can measure growth in your students. So we're going to go ahead and just take a look here at our study plan. So this is just an example of a study plan that you would see. So what it will do when students take that practice test is it's going to assess each topic for your students separately and measure to see, and again, this is just one example. This is just the sentence grammar. Keep in mind there are other ones as well, but it is going to assess their performance. So let's say that I took this as a student and maybe I got all of the questions for pronouns correct. So let's say I got 5 out of 5. In that case, I would actually test out of pronouns because I demonstrated proficiency there. And I don't even have to do any of the activities for pronouns if that's the case. Now, as I mentioned, it will examine the other topics separately. So let's say that maybe on another one, I got 3 out of 5 or 4 out of 5. In that case, I demonstrated a bit more proficiency, but I still do need a little bit of practice there with that. So in that case, I'm considered intermediate. If I didn't get at least a 3 or 4 out of 5, I'm considered a beginner on that topic. And so as you can see here, I have a little bit more practice to work through just because I didn't demonstrate quite as much proficiency on that topic. So students are going to see a variety of those 3 options happening on the various topics in here. They'll test out of some. For example, I might be intermediate on verbs, but yet maybe I'm more of a beginner on run-ons and comma splices as well as fragments. And so how this would work is this is for completion. So as they're going through here, when I go to assign it, I do assign it for a single set of points. I also give it a single due date. And how it would work is I would set the milestone of completion that I want them to hit. Keep in mind that this is for what they need to reach on their individual plan. And everyone's plans are going to be a little bit different, but this would be what you would be asking them to complete. Then whenever they hit that milestone of completion that you have set, that's when they would receive full credit for doing this. So one thing I think that's important to mention also is that students do receive partial credit for partially reaching that milestone. So if you had someone and maybe they did 85% of it, not quite the whole thing, they're still going to get credit for that work that they did put in. You can also manage their results here, so you can see how they did on that practice test before they even get into the study plan. You can see how everyone did as an individual, and you can also see how the class did as a whole on all of those topics. This is also where you can go and you can look at an individual student's plan and see exactly which ones they're working on. Plus, you can monitor it in the gradebook to see where they're at in terms of completing this. So that's just a really quick look at this. The big benefit to you as an instructor would be the fact that, normally when I was an instructor, these are the types of things that I would have to create in my Canvas course or import one, and then you would have to go through and assign all of these things separately, which can be quite a chore. So one, it takes that administrative burden off your plate there for you. And then for your students, it's going to make sure that the practice that they're doing is really tailored to them as an individual. And they tend to appreciate that they're only getting practice on those areas that they've demonstrated that they need it. So that's just a really quick look at our diagnostics. We're going to go ahead and move on to our writing tools. So Achieve does have, and I'll just go ahead and pull those up in our resources here, writing tools which you can utilize. So what we have are pre-built, completely customizable writing tools, which you can utilize and take and make your own and make it work for your course. You can, of course, even create your own writing assignments from scratch if you want to, but most of our users do find that it is a lot more convenient to just take what's already here and customize that. So our writing tools have a space where students can submit their writing. You can provide scaffolded feedback. And what I mean by scaffolded is that if you're using a book-specific Achieve, it's actually going to plug in the exact section of your book that supports that revision right there in your feedback. They click on it and it'll load side by side with their paper. We'll take a look at an example of that here in a few moments. But it's really, really useful to be able to do that. Very customizable. It's also got a space for peer review. And you can even track trends and insights in students' writing across a semester. The biggest benefit, too, that you're going to see when we look at one of these examples is also the fact that it provides a space where you can manage multi-draft assignments in here. So this is one, this is an argumentative essay. I can change that title if I want to. I can also change anything about this prompt. So I could read through here and maybe it looks pretty good to me, but I do want to make a couple of tweaks. I could just start typing and it'll automatically save for you so you don't have to worry about it losing it. Or maybe, I already have a really great prompt that I like and I want to delete what's here and plug in my own. You're totally welcome to do that as well. But it does have a space too. When students are submitting their writing, they can either choose to type in the Achieve writing space. They can also import from Google Docs or Microsoft Word. And all of this, of course, as we mentioned earlier, would integrate with your LMS for a really nice seamless experience for your students. We'll talk about some of the other features that we have in here as well. We do have a documentation style builder. And that is going to look something like this. So you can see in the screenshot example here where you would have your page header. This is going to give them, by putting this space in here, just a reminder that this is what they need to do. And then it's also going to provide them with instructions on what to do in this space. So it's not something where, if you have that turned on, it's going to do it for them, like some of the generators online instead. It's really, if you enable that, really going to more guide them on how to do it. So that is a feature in here. We also have source checks, which you can enable, and that is going to work to check for their plagiarism. We use CopyLeaks as our host for that. You can set it up to where students can run a report on their own essay prior to submitting it to you. And of course, when they submit their papers, you can have it run a report for you as well. The thing that makes our tool a little bit unique is the fact that when you have students run a report on their own paper, not only is it going to identify the different types of plagiarism in there, but it's also going to give them resources on how to fix that type of plagiarism. Again, that's optional. If you want to use it, you can, but you don't have to. We also have, as you can see, several different rubrics that you can choose from, and this does vary per title. For example, if you were teaching a literature course, you would see different rubrics here than folks that might be teaching technical communication or composition. So that would be varying a little bit there, but you can edit these. You can also use them to calculate a score. So for example, I know I used to grade in Canvas, and I personally liked that feature where it would produce a score based on my rubric selections, but that is optional. So if you don't want to use that, you don't have to. That's just a quick example of those rubrics in there. And now we're getting to really my favorite part, which is the multi-draft space in here. So with our pre-builts, draft 1 is typically an instructor review. Draft 2 is typically a peer review, and then you've got your final paper here, which is of course instructor review. But let's say that maybe you don't do 2 drafts for this particular assignment. You could always delete one of those, or maybe I'm a person that I want to do peer review first. Not a problem. You can definitely change that review type with that. It's also got some features in here which may take the process of something you may already be doing, like if you try to have them develop kind of plans for revision or making comments on that. We have a tool in here called our revision plan that makes that really, really simple. So it's on by default. You can always disable it if you don't want it, but basically for every piece of feedback that you give your students, they have to click a little button that says add note to self, and the little comment says, based on this comment, I'm going to, and they have to, 1, read your feedback, which as I can recall can be a bit of a struggle sometimes, and then 2, to let you know how they would actually apply that in their next draft. And what it'll do is it'll compile all those notes into a really nice checklist that they see side by side on their next draft. And they can go through and just to be sure that they're addressing each point of feedback they received. Now, the best part really, in my mind of this, is definitely the draft goals. As you're going to see here in a second, it really helps to set up your feedback, and it makes it super easy for students to get to resources. So what these would be are the areas of focus for this particular draft. And I can go through and I can really choose any of these that I want. I don't have to go with what's been pre-selected. And even if there's maybe something here I don't see, I can even create my own. But basically, as you can see, like with this audience awareness, for an example, it sets up my feedback for me. And it is totally customizable. But in a student submission, I would be able to highlight a portion of their paper, and I could give it one of 3 comment levels. So I could say, nice job, needs work or needs extensive revision. And then really these aspects of it could say whatever I want it to say. And then directly below that will be the exact section from my book that helps them to make that revision. And they simply will click on it, as you'll see in the example we're about to see, and it pulls up side by side with their essay. Again, just making that a much more efficient process for you. I know as a former instructor, I had certain things, like for example, this in thesis, this was something I had to type all of the time. So I had a Google Doc up of my most commonly given pieces of feedback. I used to have to copy paste that into the field in Canvas and then say something like, see page 42 in your book. And a lot of them wouldn't go do that. So this just makes that process for me a lot more simple, and for them a lot easier to get to their resources. So that's a quick look at that. The other thing that I'll mention with this is the fact that you can do peer review in here as well. And you can set up draft goals for your students, just like you set them up as an instructor to grade that. So the difference with this is, so what I can do here is I can pair them up with their peers, and I can ask them to comment, and they'll see what I want them to comment on. They'll be able to highlight a portion of their peers' paper. They also get to say, nice job, needs work, or needs extensive revision. But instead, they're giving these questions for the peer reviewer to consider. And this is really what's going to guide that feedback that they would be providing to their peer, because oftentimes, especially with something like maybe genre awareness, for example, that might be something that students aren't familiar with. So giving that context and that background really helps them and just makes it a much easier experience. Of course, you can use peer reviewer reflection questions as well. You would essentially just repeat those steps on the final paper. I do want to, with my last few minutes here, just show you an example of what a student submission would look like. So let me go ahead and pull up one of my courses, and that already has that. And this will just give you, because I know when I'm describing it, it sounds good, but I think it's really nice to actually be able to see it. And here is my course here. In this example, we're going to look at a couple of other unique features in here. Let me pull this one up. There we go. So I'm going to pull up one where I'm in the process of giving some feedback in this student submission. It does have a draft comparison mode up here, which this is going to allow both you and students to see multiple drafts on the same page at the same time. So I could see a rough draft side by side with the final, and I can either turn those comments on or off, and that's going to make it really easy to see where revisions need to be made, or as an instructor, were revisions made. Now, when I'm going through, I'm just going to give some examples of commenting. So let's say that I want to comment right here. I'm just highlighting it, and then my 3 options pop up. So I can either tie this comment to one of the draft goals that I selected when I was setting up the assignment. I can select an editing mark here, or I could just make a general comment. In this case, I want to tie this to one of the draft goals. So here are the ones I picked. You can tell this is one I customized. And in this case, maybe this needs some work. And there's the default comment for that, which I could always remove if I don't feel like it fits here. But I also like that you can make an additional comment. So if you want to say something and make it a little more specific to this particular student's essay, I can definitely do that. It maybe just takes that one sentence away that I have to type over and over again to where I can get into a little more specific here. And then I would simply save, and now you can see it gives what constitutes needs work for a thesis. And it's really as simple as just clicking on the resource here for the student, and that ebook is going to load directly next to their paper. So they never have to leave their essay to get to those resources. It can read it aloud to them, and they can, of course, enhance the formatting. It's also going to color code. So anything that I mark as a nice job is going to be in green, needs work, needs extensive revision is in orange, and that yellow, that would be an editing mark. So I can go through here, let's say I want to mark perhaps a fragment. I can do that. And so it's going to give the definition. It's not going to assume that my students know what I mean by that. And even for something like this, really simple for them just to click, and then that is going to pull up the resources that they need on that. So I would just continue going through here, giving feedback to my students. I can have a word count. You can also do a general in comment and mark that as ready to send so that once all of their submissions are done, I can send those out. It does have some different reports on an individual assignment where we can look and see students' progress as they're moving along. It'll even tell you how many nice jobs versus needs work versus needs extensive revision you've given. And even for final drafts, it's going to tell you things like average rubric scores and that sort of thing. We also have a reports tab right here. And if you go to that, it can go even more in depth. So I can see average rubric scores across a semester. I can even skip to the diagnostic reports from here. And one of my favorite features are students reviewing my feedback. So these are all of the different pieces of feedback that I have given, and I'm looking, and it seems to me like I've given a lot of comments on comma errors, but only 2 students have reviewed that. So let me dig a little deeper and see who is actually looking at that, and I can drill down into all of that information. So that's really a quick look at the diagnostics and writing tools that we have in Achieve. If you are interested in receiving a full walkthrough of all of the features and functionalities within Achieve, there will be a link in the follow-up email from this webinar where you can sign up for a demo with me. And now I'm going to go ahead and pass the ball here. Let me stop my screen share. And
I'm ready.
Natalie.
We're doing a little fancy footwork over here.
Yep. There you go.
Okay, look at that. Worked just like magic. Okay, so I've got a quick target question for you all to bookend our time and just see how confident folks are feeling about using iClicker and Achieve. It's all right if I hope you're not over here with this person. I don't know if that's a person. But I'm hoping that you can see how all these tools can really work together to reach students at all the points that they are encountering all these different materials and challenges of these classrooms. So I'll just go ahead and stop it, and I can see how folks are feeling. All right. We got people who still have some questions, and that's okay. Again, you can always sign up for a training really easily, and we'll send out information for how to do that. We have a lot of different support items for admins, instructors, and students. So if you have students who are using Achieve or iClicker, you don't need to go and create everything from scratch. We have a ton of support materials that you can use for you and your students. We also have live support available via chat, email, and phone. So I like to say if you are bringing new tech into your classroom, you do not get a new tech support job. That's for us. So if your student says, I couldn't get my answer in, you don't need to sit there and try and figure out what kind of phone they have. Go ahead and send them over to us. We will support them and work it out. And again, you can also meet with us for a training. I have this short URL that links to all of our Macmillan trainings, so you can set up for an Achieve training or an iClicker training, but we also have the full link to this that we will throw into the chat right now. So let's get to our questions and comments. What have we got? I know that we are close on time.
All right, yes, we are almost at time, but as Natalie mentioned, this is one of our favorite parts of doing these webinars. So if you have a question and you haven't put it in the chat panel yet, or the questions panel, go ahead and put it in there and we'll make sure we answer it. So we have had a couple of questions come in. First, if I'm interested in using iClicker with my Achieve course next term, where do I go in Achieve to set that up?
Okay, great. All you need to do is log into your Achieve course, go ahead and click on the grade book, which is this little icon right here, and then you're going to see this button in the upper right corner. If you've never set it up before, it'll actually say Sync iClicker. Clicking on that button will start to walk you through the entire process, and it will keep all of your iClicker data in the Achieve environment. So there's no need to go and set iClicker up with anything else. It all exists within Achieve.
Perfect. And we've touched on this. I think both Lindsay and Natalie have touched on this, but just to reiterate, can I have my iClicker and Achieve grades sent to my Canvas gradebook?
Lindsay, you want to take that one?
It does sync to your gradebook, yes.
Awesome. And I'll just add that Canvas is just one of the learning management systems that we work with. So we also offer integrations with Blackboard, Brightspace by D2L, and Moodle. And you can have everything integrated into your iClicker can be integrated into your Achieve gradebook, and then from there you can send everything up to your learning management system gradebook. All right, just one more question. Natalie, do you mind going back to that slide where you had the link for the training and demo signups? And I'll put this in the chat as well, so you can click on it, hopefully. But we just created this short link so it's easier to type into your web browser. All right, thank you.
All right.
All right, I just put that in the chat panel. But with that, that's all the questions we had. And I know we're over time, but I just wanted to thank everyone for taking the time out of your day right before a busy holiday week to join us for this webinar. We have been very excited having these two former English instructors on our staff who are able to really speak to active learning in English. In the next few days, we will be sending an email with the recording of the webinar, the slide deck, and then some of those extra resources that Natalie put together for you. So if you think of any additional questions later, feel free to respond directly to that follow-up email and we'll get you the answers you need. So from all of us here at Macmillan Learning, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, bye.